what are the things that are not being said that's holding back this group from actually progressing further than where they presently sit.
Welcome to the International Institute for Facilitation's podcast, Spaghetti on the Wall. I'm Eileen Douse, Chair Emeritus and Director of Assessments for INIFAC. And today I am joined by Lisa Caine from Down Under, as we say. She's a certified master facilitator as well as a certified virtual facilitator, and she is the founder of JELC Solutions. So today we're going to talk about facilitating boards and executives and senior managers, and something tells me she's got some great stories to share as well. Welcome, Lisa.
Hi, Eileen. It's lovely to see you again.
It is great. It's been a long time, and you used to serve on the INIFAC board, so yay, we've made contact again.
Yes, it is. It's lovely to be back in the room with you, and thank you for the invitation.
Of course. Well, here's the thing. I've also facilitated some boards, some executives, some senior managers, and I would say there's some differences. There's like personality differences that you don't necessarily get with other groups. What are some of your experiences or horror stories or good times facilitating these groups?
It's funny. I think there is definitely a dynamic across industries. So by nature of the sort of work we do as facilitators, you're not coming in as the resident expert on that industry necessarily. Right. You may have experience. My background is the military, so, there are some fields that you can, give insight to. But broadly, because we're about process, we have the joy of working across pretty much any organisation, whether it's public, private, not-for-profit, across any industry. So the joy of that for me is, I guess, the play on the personality of what the people in the room present for that industry. And two disparate examples I can give you is one was all about medical specialists. And that room was so intense and so unfriendly, not with me, but with each other. There was this big ego in the room between these very impressive specialists in terms of the work that they did, compared with another group, which was all about deep sea fishing. And they were the body in South Australia for deep sea fishing. And I tell you what, I learned all sorts of things about the way orca whales teach their young to fish and so on, because they've seen it out in the oceans, in the deep oceans. And those guys were extremely informal, very relaxed, but very on point about what they were trying to achieve. So, yeah, I think that's one of the pleasures of working with disparate groups, from one day to the next.
What I'm hearing you say is it's not one size fits all, if I'm hearing that right. And I'm going to challenge that a little bit because, you know me, having worked with me, that's what I do. I would add to that, not one size fits all. I do think that executives maybe a little bit have a different mindset. You mentioned the egos, but certainly they tend to have a mindset of being a strategic thinker. Like, what is their goal for being in the meeting, or where their head is focused as it relates to the organization. Is that right?
I'd agree with you. Of course, being the board, they are the strategic players for the organisation, so they do set the course for the organisation. And of course, the CEO and executive deliver on that.
Right.
But that's not to say that everybody in the room in a board, and you get people that are very experienced and people that are brand new to a board, and necessarily in that space naturally. It takes some skill and effort, doesn't it, to think at the strategic level. But the quick way to identify who and where the people in the room sit on that score is the questions that they ask or the looks on their faces. because you can see that some people are itching to ask more about the detail and get down into the how. How are we going to deliver on this? And that's important to a point, but it's not the conversation we're trying to have right now in this particular setting, you know, in that particular moment with the board. But you're right, it's all about that strategic positioning, isn't it? And getting people to agree what is the way forward for us in how we
I'm
move.
sorry.
Yeah.
What I was going to say was one point that I want to pull out with something that you said was that importance for a facilitator to assess the room. Like if you, as you had mentioned, you have the group that's tense, not with you, but with each other, or you have the group that get along, or the
Yes.
group that is very focused. The power of assessing about who's in the room, whether you use a tool to do that, or you just have that ability to do that as a facilitator, whatever it is, assessing the people who are in the room, I think is critical as a facilitator.
Yeah, you do have to think on your feet very quickly because behaviours do change, don't they, as the conversation progresses. Some people are very wedded to a position, others are laissez-faire, others are posturing maybe in a very negative way because they want to derail what we're doing. It's a threat to them. But I think a lot of, whilst you do need to think on your feet and respond to that, particularly if there's dysfunction in the room, for me, a lot of it comes in the preparation before we even start the workshop. So meeting with the sponsor, engaging with all of the key players. If I can possibly meet them in person, that's ideal, but often that's not the case. It's typically virtually these days. And it's actually, in some ways, I prefer to work virtually because you can achieve so much in the virtual space without the disruption of, you know, flying everybody into a city. But yeah, I think that prior preparation for the facilitator is really key because then you can identify, not just through the sponsor's lens, but through some of the pre-material that you might read or learn about in conversation really helps position you well. And you do need to be prepared for that. Otherwise, you know, the whole thing can be derailed very quickly.
I think that may just be one of the challenges for facilitators because I completely agree with you. You have to be prepared, over prepared, know what you're doing, and you have to be prepared for it all going out the window and something else happening. I was working with an
Yes.
exec team on a strategic planning session. It was going well, and it was a 1 day session. And at lunchtime, the grand poobah of this group said, Eileen, this is going really well. Do you know what I really want to do this afternoon? Is not what we had planned, but could we do this instead? And I'm like, sure we can. I'll just pull something together in the lunch hour. And I think you have to be able to do that when you're working with decision makers who can say,
Yes.
no, we're not staying on this path. I see a benefit to shifting course
Yes.
because it will benefit the group.
Yeah, I must admit, I've got a couple of examples I can share with you on that, but it can be quite derailing. And often when that happens, it's completely contrary to what you've actually agreed with the sponsor, assuming this is coming from the sponsor,
Yeah.
at the beginning. And it may mean that actually you can't deliver on what you said you would do or what you were asked to do. A
Absolutely.
classic example, not to try and do better with that story there.
You please,
I,
please do better.
I had a delightful CEO. It's actually here where I am at the moment on the New South Wales coast, ironically. But he was the CEO of a really very well-run aged care facility, and they had various centres dotted around different cities. And anyway, he said, I'm having this retreat and we're bringing all the executive staff and the board down to the New South Wales South Coast. And anyway, we were, did the morning workshop, and the idea was we were going to break for lunch. Well, he announced to the group, hadn't said anything to me, everyone, they've got a bus waiting for you outside. We're going to zip down to the marina, and we're off on a cruise this afternoon. And that was the afternoon gone, which meant we weren't going to finish any of the wrap up. We weren't going to get the information we needed for me to write the wash up report, etc. It was a gorgeous afternoon, but it meant I needed to have a conversation with him on the side because it wasn't part of the plan. But
Well, yeah,
nonetheless,
and
it all worked out.
yeah, and that one's interesting as well because often the sponsor doesn't understand. I want to say the process or the progression is probably a better word. There is a great importance to a wrap up and a check in with where everybody's mind is, right?
Yes,
If you just say, hey, we had a great brainstorming session, now we're off on the water, well, that's fun, but that also makes you look um, sketchy because you're like, well, wait a second, you promised X. So.
true. The conversation's left hanging, and of course, the mood of the group shifts completely. They're in wind down mode now. There was no way there was an opportunity to wind them back in. But we had a fabulous lunch, and alcohol was involved and the whole bit. So I said to him, we're going to have to revisit this
Yeah.
on another day because we haven't got closure here on the
Good
work
for
we're meant to
you.
be doing.
Good for you.
But he was very relaxed. So
Yeah.
that encouraged me to be a bit more relaxed about it. But yeah,
That's something else that I want to pull out from what you just said. You had the ability to speak to the sponsor, the executive, whatever, and say, wait a second, we need to do a follow up. And I think that's equally important as a facilitator because someone who is um, in control or in the lead position may always be taking the lead. And it's that understanding of roles to say, you're asking for this, so I'm okay if you take the lead, yet I can't
however,
promise you this.
that's right. Yeah, we've just changed the deck chairs, haven't we? And this is not what I signed up for. So let's
Exactly.
revisit it. Yeah. But it really is about reading the situation, isn't it? And the mood of the person. Yeah, it's a joyride, really, isn't it? Working with different groups.
I don't know if
And
all facilitators call it a joyride. There have been times in a facilitation I'm thinking, why am I doing this? Like, and I'm smiling and I'm thinking, what the heck did I sign up for? And it all works out and it's great.
what am I thinking? Yes, exactly.
Right. And I do think it's extremely important to be able to be able to use your voice. And if the sponsor doesn't like it, well, that's unfortunate. At a minimum, you're educating them on facilitation and
Yeah,
what's
yeah.
important.
Yeah, and the consequence, I think, importantly, about what it is that you have agreed to deliver on, because if that's compromised, it's very easy for you as the hired help to be blamed or the finger pointed, oh, she didn't X, she didn't Y.
Right.
So yeah, setting those boundaries again, it's all, a lot of this is part of that prior preparation
Yes.
with the sponsor in particular, because they're the one that you're really responding to. So yeah, making sure that understanding, rapport and boundaries and all of those things that we're actually that what we might be communicating in different languages, different terminology and postures, but ultimately, are we actually aligned to what we're trying to achieve here? And if that's going to be changing on the run, then we need to revisit, how we're going to bring closure to what we've said we'd do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And with the group as well, that whole operating principles, ground rules, rules of engagement, whatever, that
Yes.
intro time is so important as well, right? So
And
that
isn't that
everybody
interesting?
knows
Yeah,
who's in the
that's interesting,
room.
Eileen. Yeah, because if the shots are changing, if the sponsor is changing the course of what's agreed, you certainly can't and you shouldn't
Right.
contradict or make them look silly.
Right.
So it's a little bit of who's coordinating or presenting to the group here in terms of what we're now doing, because it's a changed tactic. It's just a different direction that we're going in.
Right.
So I'm always very conscious of making sure that the sponsor is, respected and not undermined in any way.
Great.
So yeah, it really is a little bit about let's have some time out and have a quick conversation offline, so that I missed something here.
That's right. I think it's
Yeah.
time for a break now.
That's right, like
You
right
and
now.
me, we're breaking. We've
Yeah.
been talking about executives or senior managers, that group. I want to switch a little bit here to boards, which can equally have its own challenges, opportunities, because some boards, the people are there because they want to be on that board and they don't want to do a darn thing. Some people are there because they can't get their needs met in their work life or their personal life or whatever. So they're on this board and they're fulfilling some unmet need that way. And I think that sets up for some different dynamics. What do you think?
Yes, I think so. People do join boards for very different reasons, but I think boards now are far more accountable than they ever were. Not that I was a
Good point.
facilitator back in the early 70s, but just reading and sort of following autobiographies from people that I've respected that were on boards and so on in those early days.
Yeah.
It was a long lunch. It really was. It was a CV filler. And while some people are still motivated, and fair enough, if it's career progressive for them to do that, to be on this board, that board, a range of boards, that's not a bad thing. But I think boards now are much more accountable, and you are expected to actually be making a valid contribution, no more just sort of idling in, not having read the papers, not making a contribution. And I think a respectable board would address that pretty quickly if somebody's taking a seat that would otherwise be filled with somebody that is making, a valid contribution.
Sure. Or
So, yeah.
you have the person who's the wise sage on the board,
Yes.
and maybe they're not so wise, and no one wants them off the board because they've always been on the board. I mean, there is that
Yes,
piece there that,
yes,
I've just seen those people, the old CEO, the old chairman who just sits on that board.
yes,
And that changes the dynamics because everybody looks to him and everybody says, "What should we do, Joe?"
yes.
And I'm thinking, no, what about Sally and
The
Frank
rest of
and
it.
everybody else?
It's funny you mentioned that. I was at a club just recently, and I just happened to notice the board, the actual board of all the former presidents, all the current and former presidents. And the president of these, it was a golf club, had been sitting on the board, big chunks of the same person for 6 years, 5 years, these big, long windows of time. And I think you see a lot less of that these days, but it's probably healthy, I think, to not necessarily have a hot seat arrangement, but for not have that sort of longevity, because you do need some fresh thinking, and you're not the only person in the room with all the good ideas. So
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah,
over. Yeah.
this one's a yes and. So having the longevity, I think, can be valuable if that person doesn't do the "we've always done it this way before" or "we can't do it
Yes.
that way because it didn't work before," and sort of
Is
cuts
open to new
down
ideas.
the new thinking. So I don't think that's valuable. And I've seen boards who the entire board changes and then it's starting new every change, and
Yeah,
they're
that's
taking
disruptive.
so long for catch up that's
Yes,
not
that's right. You do
beneficial
need
either.
continuity, don't you? Yes.
Yeah,
And you don't want to forget all the good ideas from the past. But
right,
yeah, I guess for me, it flags something about why is this one person still the chair after many
right,
years?
right.
What is everybody else's
Yeah,
contribution? Is everybody being heard, etc.? So yeah, there's a lot for boards to consider, but the great thing is really that there's some fantastic education out there for it, not just with in Australia, at least the Australian Institute of Company Directors gives some great grounding for good governance and the fiduciary duties, responsibilities, etc. of board members. But even just on social media and YouTube and so on, there are fantastic educators out there who are actively promoting, board type scenarios, board problems, etc., with some great options. So information's there if people are very proactive about wanting to do the best
well,
as a
you're
board.
leading into my next question,
Oh,
Lisa, and that is, when we talk about executives or senior managers or boards, what tips or suggestions do you have for facilitators who maybe want to start going and facilitating these types of groups?
Yes. I think one of the things to recognise is that if you've not been on board yourself as a facilitator and you don't really understand that dynamic, there's probably a little bit of homework to do, because you might just assume there's a lot of intelligent people sitting around the table, but intelligence really isn't the problem. The problem is the conversation in the room. And I think that's what a facilitator brings, whether it's a board, whether it's a group dynamic of a sporting entity or some other organisation. We as facilitators ought to be raising the level of the conversation. And I think a big part of that is in our preparation, what are the things that are not being said that's holding back this group from actually progressing further than where they presently sit? And doing the prep that we all do, Eileen, is, well, you're a certified master facilitator, I am. Last check last week, speaking with a colleague of ours, Michael Wilkinson, apparently there's only 53 of us in the world. I'm one of 2 in Australia. But any facilitator, it's the preparation you do and what techniques are you going to bring into the room to really support that group and encourage that free flow of dialogue, but actually progress it. You don't want people to just be you the talking head in the room and it not moving the group to a better place. So yeah, big responsibility, I think, but I think that's the core of what we do really, is we elevate the conversation.
Lisa, I know we're on video, and I just feel the wisdom oozing through the screen. It's great. I love it. So I want to thank you so much for your time, that valuable time. I know that. So thank you, and thank you for sharing your insights. It's great.
It's been a delight, Eileen, and we must catch up separately, but thank you so much for the invitation. I'm thrilled to be here.